Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. I have a question for you. If you met somebody for the very first time, would you be able to tell whether or not they had schizophrenia? I know I wouldn't. Maybe you might think they're just a little bit different, perhaps. Anyway, my guest today is a friend of mine. He's been on the show a few times. He is the author of this book, My Bag of Trips. And what it says here is my history, story, and experiences with drugs and psychosis. Time to meet my wonderful friend, Robert James Koyich. Welcome back to the
Thank you,
show.
thank you. How are you feeling today? What's your
I'm good,
world?
thank you. Good, thanks. I know you prefer to be called Rob, right?
Generally, yes, yes.
I always forget because, I was introduced, I guess you introduced yourself as Robert, like the first time on the show. So that's
Mhm.
what gets stuck in my head.
Well, formal introductions, legal names, like just formal. I am Robert, but I prefer Rob. It's more comfortable that way.
Okay. Now I want to tell the audience why I asked them about if they would recognize anybody who is schizophrenic, and the reason why is because you are, correct?
Yep, yep.
So that's one of the reasons you wrote this particular book.
Yeah, I'm well under control with medication now. My positive symptoms are near minimal. I do have side effects from my medication that I take for my brain, for my schizophrenia. But the premise of writing the book is also from my boss at landscaping recommending you should write about all your drug stories. So I gathered all my drug stories together, and probably about 75-80% of them are in that book, My Bag of Trips.
Yes, and I've read it. It took me a while because I'm a slow reader nowadays. Not, there's gone are the days when I could read a book in an evening. But anyway, some of it I got, some of it I didn't understand, like some of the terminology.
Mhm.
Um, it's hard in a way, like even though I know personally, I know family members who got into drugs really badly. It is still hard for me to relate to, you know.
You have
Uh,
to understand it from a non-drug perspective, question mark.
Yeah, well, I would say I'm a food I'm addicted to food, and I have
Yeah,
to be careful all the time. Otherwise, I'd be, like that. But it's quite a journey. And what amazes me is how, like, it sounds like from the reading it that you were really eager to try things, right?
I was immersed. If it was smokable, I'd smoke it. If it was consumable, I'd consume it, but I would not do needles. But
But what drugs? Like, how did you start? For
uh
people who haven't read your book, but I would just want to say, everybody, I suggest you read this book.
it's at the book, man. The story started first with dabbling with cigarettes when I was like grade three, grade four, in Australia, and then went to I had alcohol dabble in high school, not so much junior high school, thankfully, but alcohol was never a big issue for me. Where I got into the drugs more so were the marijuana in the summer of grade 9 and 10,
Mhm.
and smoking my first joint there and having a wonderful experience. And then delving into some other drugs on that summer, and then just eventually shifted into like high school use, marijuana, and yeah, it led into all sorts of other stuff. My first part of my book, you read it, the Happy Hippie Fun Days, when I went away to SFU campus to go to university, to go to school, and I was a free range chicken. I could do anything I wanted to do, and I decided to do a shit ton of drugs. So mainly just marijuana and mushrooms in that first drug life, the first of three drug lives. So it was just fun to do. It seemed like a spiritual thing at some points, but after about 12 or 13 mushroom trips, I ended up going a bit loopy, and I got shipped back to Edmonton.
Well, and people need to know, like, if they're going to read it, before they're going to read, you're very honest about,
Mhm,
especially when you're really deep into the drugs and your
mhm,
behavior at that time, right?
mhm. Yes.
I'm amazed at how much you remember.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
know, it really
yeah.
is kind of interesting. Um, Now with the psychosis, now I know you were sent to was it in the hospital?
I was sent to Grey Nuns Hospital in Edmonton after I moved from SFU campus back to Edmonton. And I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 months for my first intake and psychiatrical evaluation in a test subject group. And then back to my mom's house that I left when I went away to go to SFU campus. And then got involved hanging out with street kids and street life and drug dealers. And my second drug life was living with the dealers, where I only had like about three or 4 weeks in the psych ward during that period. But the third psych ward trip was in Vancouver later after I fled Edmonton to Vancouver.
So at what point? were you diagnosed with schizophrenia?
Diagnosed schizophrenia after the first trips to the psych ward, the drug-induced psychosis from the marijuana and mushrooms, where people say to the herbals, just marijuana mushrooms, you're fine. For me, it did not lead that way. It led to psychosis and a schizophrenic diagnosis back in 98.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was going to say, not everybody who does drugs gets schizophrenia, right?
Yeah, and for some people, marijuana is the miracle cure for them, where for me, it's like psychosis, paranoia, delusions.
Right. And you also say that what's the word I want to do when they do I can't think of the word.
The
It'll come,
EEG, the EEG where they put the cap on my head and the electrodes and all that,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
something different.
Well, that do you remember what that felt like?
I recall that was more so that was near about the first trips to the psych ward. I was in a test subject group between risperidol or Haldol, with the blind study that they had me in for whether they would give me Haldol or risperidone. The doctors pretty well decided it's probably risperidone that I was on, which is one of the two meds that I'm on now. But they put the cap on my mind and they gave me a battery of tests and questions, not experiments, but a bunch of tests and processes that I need to follow through with. And yeah, one time they put this cap on my head. They did that about 2 or 3 times and locked me in a room and pressed the button on the board to see if I responded. And they tracked my brain waves, the biological element of brains.
No, when you get electric shock like that, does it?
Oh, the electroshock. That's something different. That's
Sorry,
electroshock therapy. Yeah, that's something
yeah.
different.
You had that as well, right?
Yes, yeah, about 10 or 12 rounds of it. Yeah, and I don't ever recall giving consent for them to be able to do so.
But now with that, you must have lost some
Memories, yes. Got my brain. Yeah. Yep.
Because I know one of my nieces years ago, she was mowing the lawn and she got hit by lightning. And she lost all memories from before that time. You know, I don't know what difference in the power is, like an electricity.
Oh, a lightning bolt is far stronger. It's a mild current that they pass through the brain through electrodes in electroshock therapy, the ECG.
But you said you don't know where they got the permission, but wouldn't
Oh
it
no.
been from your parents?
Maybe, I don't know. That was in my Vancouver trip, my 3rd trip to the psych ward. It was my 3rd trip to the psych ward where they gave me the electroshock.
Oh, excuse me. I got a phone.
Sure, it's not a problem.
Never mind, I'll call back. It's my doctor. My doctor.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just yeah, it was the 3rd trip to the psych ward. They gave me electroshock, and I don't recall ever giving them consent. And I've yet to request my medical documentation and my medical records to find out where the consent was given for that exercise.
Right. So now, do you remember with electroshock? Do you remember how you felt before, how you felt during, how you felt after?
I can take myself back there cognitively. Yes, I generally don't think about it, but I recall the before the procedure being strapped in a gurney table, and they put a mask on my face and they put oxygen in the mask and asked me to breathe, and then they injected something in I think it was in my left arm, and then felt the chemical crawling up my arm, and then kind of a smell like garlic, nasty smell, like it was just bizarre smell, taste, and then also gone. And then I wake up in my psych ward room and just like headache, pulsing.
Wow. Wow. What a weird experience that must have been.
Yep. Yep.
One of the things you speak very fast. Did you always do this?
Slow down. I've sometimes spoken at an accelerated pace, but one thing I noticed is that I recall I'm talking to you, Nancy, but there's also the other people that will see this show. And so the elements of talking to somebody, usually if I'm one-on-one, I can regulate. If somebody is understanding, I know how to adjust my pace. And I do talk fairly quickly, but it's sometimes excitement, sometimes just having a lot of words to say, and sometimes the fact that I'll use a paragraph to say something somebody can say in a sentence. I'm verbose that way. I have more words out of my face than most people. So yeah, I get chatty. I do over disclose sometimes, and I've got a lot of things. I don't speak a short sentence or a phrase. I usually have a paragraph. Like
okay.
go.
I have friends that speak very fast, you know, and it's nothing to do with drugs or anything like that. That's just who they are, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Fast talkers, yeah.
But I'm just wondering if before you did drugs, were you the same?
I don't recall how I was pre-drugs. I don't have much memory of my childhood. I don't have much memory of my high school years. I know some of the stories and elements of back when I was in high school, but it's like fragments and shards, bits and pieces. But I don't have a full understanding of how I was when I was a child and how my speech patterns or my behaviors were so much. I have some not counterfactual evidence, but I'm not entirely clear how I was before the drugs.
Okay. I was just wondering if your parents ever remarked on, your speech,
I know my dad's sister will tell me, Rob, slow down. She can't understand when I speak at a quick pace.
right?
But there are a couple other friends where we speak really quickly just because we have a lot to say and can regulate. Yes, I understand. Yes, I don't understand. And other friends might say, Rob, stop, slow down. And I can do that, but I'm usually accelerated, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, right. No, with your book,
Yes,
I know
yes.
that you've been selling them at, we have for those who don't live in Chilliwack, we have a market that happens every Sunday, is it on Mill Street, right? Off of Mill Street?
Um, Off Mill Street in the back parking lots behind the Bookman.
Right. So you've been selling your book there, right?
I went to the first of 8 days that I'll be selling at the market on June 2nd. On June 16th will be the next sale day. For me, I get a sell with another person who lives in my building who's also an author. Her name is Grace Darney. She has 2 children's books for sale. And Grace and I will be selling in the market on June 16th and another 6. Well, she'll be there for only 6 of the 8, but I'll be there for 8.
This is not going to air before then. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. We'll be back at the market again in the future.
Okay, but what I wanted to ask you is, as being there and selling your book to people like a one-on-one, what was that experience like for you?
It is fantastic. I technically went to a market on the previous Saturday and then this past Sunday. But the issue with this past Sunday is that it was raining, so there's about like 5% of the number of walk-through traffic that there would be on a sunny day. I know this is volunteering in the market the previous year, and I'll be at the market every weekend on Sunday, either at the volunteer booth or at my sales booth, up until about October. So I plan on bringing a couple copies with me in my backpack for if I'm not selling at the market, in case there's word of mouth and people want to get a copy. But they also have a bunch of my books at the Bookman. The Bookman has copies.
Right, and or they can just, like, you're on Facebook, so people can always contact you on Facebook, right?
I've got security settings that make sure random people can't necessarily message me. I don't get so many random friend requests or such because it's friend to friends that can contact me.
Okay, yeah. So if it was a friend of mine,
Yeah, they
you
should.
would see that we have friends in common, right?
Yeah. Well,
That
it also hides my friends. It doesn't show who my friends are on Facebook.
because you've got it all private.
High security settings because I don't like random encounters as much as I used to.
Okay, all right. Well, I get that. A lot of people are like that. For me, it's different only because I get a lot of my interviews through Facebook.
Yep.
Where it works well. Eh, eh, what another question I need to ask you is, by the way, why did you choose this cover?
Oh, because mushrooms look exciting and interesting, but they're dangerous to the stock and watch out. Sorry for the swear.
Yeah.
So, it's like, don't judge a book by its cover. Oh, it looks good and exciting. Watch out. It's not necessarily the best idea.
Right. So how long did it take you from beginning to end, or did you keep track of that to write?
Creation for this book, I started back in like 2001. I published July 2023, so it's looking about 2 years. Is really, really tricky to write because I had some flashbacks like at the end of Happy Hippie Fun Days when I had only done marijuana mushrooms at that point. I'm having like acid and meth flashbacks in that experience and take myself back in time to the fright nights at the close of Happy Hippie Fun Days. There are a couple sessions where I sat down and I just started like, chip away at the quarry, write a few hundred words, but then one night I ended up writing about like 11 or 12,000 words in like a 7, 8, 9, 10 hour session, just write, all memory dump. The editing was a bit tricky, and it's also a book that will not be an audiobook because I don't have to voice the entire story and relive all the experiences. It's kind of a book that recommended, write your book about drugs, your experiences, wrote it, publish it, let it go out to the world. But tricky material, not an easy book to write, but it took me about 2 years to answer your question.
Right, for sure. I just want to tell people like first time smoking marijuana is not a good experience for everybody. Like I personally had a really, I was 50 the first time I tried it, and I had a really, and it was the last time because I had really bad experience, so that's kind of interesting to me that you had a really wonderful experience. And I don't know how it affects people's brains, or, like now that it's legalized, we're in a different position in the world or place with it, at least in Canada, right?
Yep. I recall the day it was legalized, I'm thinking I still can't smoke dope. I wish I could. I haven't had a joint since 2004, and I wish I could just sit at home and smoke dope all day with my friends. But I know I'd probably go psychotic, back to the psych ward, back to the hospital, wouldn't be able to function or work as a human being in a job, and I'd probably just like self-destruct. So because of that fear, I scare myself sober by saying I love marijuana. I just don't smoke it. I can't do it. I won't do it. And I'm hoping I reach that point with the cigarettes. I'll get to the point, well, not so much the love of cigarettes, but to get to the point where, no, I don't smoke anymore. No, pass, go away, go away. But right now, it's cigarettes and coffee are my two drugs, my two addictions.
I was a smoker for about 30 years, by the way.
Yeah, I recall. I recall.
So
You
it's,
smoked before.
it's one of those things that you have to get it up here, right?
Mhm.
When whatever you're addicted to, doesn't matter what it is, you have to get it up here.
Yep, and the commitment
Nobody can tell
result.
you,
Yeah.
oh, you should quit or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, I keep running on, I keep thinking of questions and then I get talking and I forget my questions.
Well, there is a lot of kickback also. If somebody's doing drugs or substances, whether it be some menial like cigarettes or if it is another type of drug, telling them you should get off the drugs will have a bit of a defensive reactive stance in some cases where the person will like, push back and they'll entrench even further into the drugs. Like when people,
Yeah.
if somebody is going to have a conversation about quitting drugs, that'd be the one who's doing the drugs to raise the issue, concern, question, requesting support compared to forcing it upon them. Because like EEGs or NBFs, people don't like generally having things forced upon them or somebody's opinion, or even like religion. If somebody pushes religion at somebody else, there's also a strong kickback sometimes when the other person is not welcome or open to it.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I don't like anybody preaching to me, you know. I mean, it's hard as, but you know, I'm a parent, so you know, when my kids were young, obviously I wanted to tell them don't do this and don't do that, right?
That's parental influence compared to pitching believe this or don't do that. It's like you should quit drugs. Why? Like the I don't have that answer.
Yeah. You can't, like you said, you can't force anybody. It doesn't do any good anyway, right?
Yeah,
Now,
positive, good things.
pardon?
To positive things, to good things. What else? What else?
Now, in the past, I know that you did some speaking on it, right?
I talked a bit at Toastmasters. I was part of Toastmasters for 2 to 4 years. And I've also spoken to about 4 or 5 classrooms at UFE where I've spoken to a class like 20, 30 people. I talked about the giving group at those groups. And back when I was writing, I just the first like 2 or 3 or 4 books published in the Fountains. So I talked about Fragments of Intent, the giving group. I didn't have Bag of Trips back then. So I've not actually talked to a public group about my bag of trips. It's not a book that I've spoken about on stage, and it's a book that I'd love to discuss and have a process and have a Q&A session, have a discussion. Okay, let's talk about drugs. What do you know? How can we help you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is that kind of book that definitely that needs to be read, you know, or with an audience and you know, hopefully they will have read it first, right?
Mhm.
And then they can ask you questions and you know, you'll have some good answers for them. Like I think like it's almost better to reach like school children, like young children.
I wouldn't recommend the book for young children.
No, sorry. Not to read it. No, gosh, not to read it, right? They've
Yeah,
learned too much. No, but I mean, as far as like the reasons why not to do drugs, you know, you're a really good, a wonderful example of somebody who should never have done it, right?
a lived experience and explanation and demonstration of these are the parameters I experienced. Lived experience of why for some people I still have that trip that for some people marijuana is their cure, but for me it
Yeah.
was not, and I would not promote it. I would not market it. But I there's another documentary I saw called The God Plant. I watched that with a friend at their place, and it's all about pro marijuana, how the medical benefits of marijuana, the history of marijuana, the prohibition, and when it became illegal, and how and why. And so that would be one tidbit. The God Plants is a video to watch. It's pro marijuana. But when I watch it, I'm like, I wish I could. I can't. I know for me, I must not. I am allergic to it, is another way to phrase it, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah.
Psychologically, not physically.
Yeah, I will be interviewing somebody who promotes it, you know.
Yeah,
And again, you know, I've never had you know, I've tried like the TLC and all that, you know, the gummies and all those things, and
yeah.
my arthritis or whatever. It's never done anything for me, you know.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
So
Oh, and
it's,
that's the thing also. Some people, the first time they ever smoke marijuana, there's no effect. They're just like, what happened? Nothing. And
yeah,
then for me, whoo, the sky, it's universe it's bouncing. Like just
wow, wow.
I'm a chaos calamity. It was like, exciting. It was new. It was drugs, and I'd never done it before. And it's like, oh, let's do more of this. And then led into all sorts of chaos, like just bad life choices that I made. And I share them in the book. I wanted to call it a cautionary tale, but it just the subtitle that I did use explains it more. My drug story, history, and experiences through drugs and psychosis.
My experience with when I did the marijuana was like everything inside my body was speeding up.
Mhm.
It was driving me, it just wasn't a good experience, you know? Like I tell people, it's like my molecules were having a party and banging into each other and whatever. That's what it felt like. And it's just like I listened to people talk this, you know, because it was a group of us and it's like everybody was talking in super speed.
Yeah, you still have body reaction memory just seeing you on the screen, if noticing how you recall that experience and how
It
it
was
disrupted you, I guess, for lack of a better term.
it was awful. It was really
Yeah,
awful. So I don't recommend it to anybody, you know.
yeah, yeah.
But you know, but again, I would not, especially
Whew.
I would tell kids don't for
Yeah.
for young children. Don't, no, 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 no.
No, no, sure, 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 sure.
Because not everybody, we know that not everybody who smokes marijuana does harder drugs. But for a
Yeah.
lot of people, it is a gateway, right?
Yep. And many people, marijuana mushrooms might not cause them schizophrenia, but for some people, due to their genetic components of how their birth was, how their early years were,
Yeah.
it could definitely be a trigger into psychosis, drug-induced psychosis that then leads to schizophrenia. And then if somebody's schizophrenic, they might have to take medication. Those medications are usually lifelong. And there's a battle to find the right balance, the right mix. I'm just really fortunate that I'm on the right mix of meds that keep me safe, secure, stable, sober, sane. But I also like had psychotic episodes back in like 2017 and 18 and no joints since 2004, the decades later consequences of drugging. And I hope I don't have another episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You're actually one of three people that I know
Mhm.
that were diagnosed with schizophrenia as a result of drugs.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
know, one was way back in my youth, and it's like, you know, I didn't realize at the time that that was the relation. I found out later on as an adult. Uh, and then another one was, you know, by the time I met him, he was a man, an artist, and he just always, you know, did drugs. But I think it was always basically marijuana. And then the next thing you know, he's just not acting right anymore, you know?
Mhm.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, but I agree. I think again recommend this for parents.
Yes.
Rec
Yes.
I really highly recommend it. It is a good way to find out what happens to young people when they get into drugs, what they can do from like, you know, from starting off with something with marijuana and mushrooms and then, you know, the
Watch out how it can cascade and amplify. And
yeah,
I think the one thing that I didn't do very well in the book is explain fully how to support people. There's no element of like, this is how you get off drugs, or this is how I got off drugs. I just had a natural progression that I no longer do drugs. But I think the biggest thing is like, give people sanctuary, give people a safe space, the less judgment, less stigma, like be there to support and
yeah,
like there's that one story about Gloria, it's her real name, my mom's friend, who when I was in the psych ward on a day pass, she took me to her house, gave me a fuzzy blanket, a bubble bath, and a fire to sit at, and it was like sanctuary, tranquility is like
wow,
safety away from all the calamity and chaos and psychosis, and that sanctuary that we can give to people, whether it be a safe place, a conversation, a communication, or even hospitality, is something that is exceptionally valuable to remember people that, yeah, don't worry, you can be okay, life can be all right, and
right,
people
right.
care.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to end it, Robert. We're just about out of time, I think, but I just want
Okay,
to
very well.
I want to remind people you can get this book at the Bookman in here in Chilliwack.
Yep, yep.
Is there any other place they can get it? Because people, not everybody's in Chilliwack.
It's difficult to find on Amazon. If somebody searches my first and last name on Amazon in the book section, not in all, but in books,
Yeah,
it should show up my bag of trips.
okay.
Uh,
And I
and
really suggest reading it, people. I really highly, highly, highly recommend it.
thank you, dear
Anyway,
Nancy.
so
Well,
yeah, stay on camera there, Robert. So
yep, yep.
thank you everybody for watching the show. Take care. I hope you continue to do so, by the way. And
Yeah.
you know, I hope the sun shines last. So thanks everybody.
Okay, love and luck. Be well.
Peace out.
Bye.